Choices and consequences. That is the theme of today's podcast episode. And it comes from a picture book that I recently read at a book club that I run at my kids' elementary school called Teach Your Dragon to Understand Consequences. And I understand also the fact that it comes from a picture book and you're older than an elementary student. But this concept, this idea of choices and consequences is one of my absolute favorite lessons to teach, not just to kids or students, but in life in general. Before I get started into that lesson, this is Spaniard School of the Student Podcast. This is episode number 59, Choices and Consequences. And so I taught this book yesterday. I have a book club that I run at my kids' elementary school. I taught this book, and it was such a powerful lesson. I've covered a lot of great books in that book club this year, but it is like top 3, 4 favorite lessons to teach in general, especially to my own kids as well. That idea of choices and consequences. And this book is about a little kid who has a pet dragon. He's got to teach this pet dragon a bunch of things. There's like 14 or 15 books in the series. But this idea was teaching the dragon the idea of choices and consequences. And so I broke it down for the kids, and I'm going to kind of give you an expedited or a faster version of the lesson that I gave them yesterday. And so I jotted down in front of me some of the lessons that I taught the kids, and I'll run down through it. I'll also give you 2 specific strategies that you can use when making choices in your own life, such that these consequences are more positive than they are negative. So one of the things that I taught the students then that I'm going to pass on to you now is this simple idea that every choice has a consequence. And sometimes that consequence is positive, sometimes that consequence is negative. So whenever we hear the word consequence, when I go back to when I was a kid and I remember my mom saying, Charles Lewis Brenneman, in that voice where I was getting in trouble, I thought of that as a consequence. Going to the principal's office is a consequence for misbehaving in class or for cheating on a test or for being absent too many times. We think of this idea of a consequence as straight negative, that there's nothing positive about it. The reality of consequence is that you make a choice or take an action, there is a consequence. Consequence doesn't necessarily mean negative all the time. The reality is that you make a choice, you do a thing, you take an action, there is a consequence. In this book, because it's a picture book, it simplifies the word consequence into the word result. So think of this. Think of you make a choice, there is a result. You make a choice, there is a consequence. That choice could be a positive choice or a negative choice. That consequence could be a positive consequence or a negative consequence. So the first thing that I want to point out is that reality, that consequence is not necessarily negative, but the reality that your choices have consequences. Better choices generally lead to better consequences. Better choice, better result. That's the first idea or introduction that I want to lay out to you right now. Choices have consequences, not always negative. Next thing to consider, to make your best choice, consider the consequences ahead of time. I understand what it's like to be right here, right now, make a decision. You're at school, all your friends are doing this thing. You have no time to process what you're actually doing. You make the choice, boom, there's a consequence. To make better choices, right? This is a strategy for you. To make better choices, consider the consequences ahead of time. You're presented with a situation, hit pause, step back, ask yourself, hey, if I do this thing, what is the result? If I do this thing, what are the consequences going to be? It's kind of thinking ahead, not thinking just in the moment, but actually, like I said, hitting pause, thinking ahead. I do this thing, what will the consequence be? And none of these are, none of this is 100% going to make you win in life. It's just what I'm doing now, what they did, what Steve Herman did in this book, is that he presented ideas to help you increase the odds that you make better choices with better consequences. Next thing to consider, another strategy, if you're interested in making better choices, is to consider others when making choices and how your choice affects them. I do recommend this picture book, whether you're middle school, high school, a parent. It's a great book. And one of the things he points out in this book that the young boy teaches the dragon is that if you want to make better choices, consider others before you make those choices. Consider how your actions impact others. There's some great pages or sequences in the book where the dragon wants to litter or the dragon wants to steal. And the main character, the boy in the story, points out to the dragon that, hey, if everybody did this, then, speaking of littering, if everybody did this, then we'd have a lot uglier of an earth. If everybody stole, then the store wouldn't have anything. If everybody lied, then we couldn't operate as a society. Consider how your choice affects others before making your choice. And I know, going back to thinking, the strategy I gave you, thinking before you make your choice, consider the consequences ahead of time. I understand what it's like to be a kid. I still have difficulty doing this in my own life, but this first strategy of consider the consequences before you make a choice and consider others when making choices. Those two strategies can help you make better choices in your life. And the reason that I want to help you make better choices in your life, and it's not necessarily good choice, bad choice, good person, bad person. It's better choices, right? Better choice can mean different things in different situations. But what I'm interested in, why I'm presenting the show to you in this way, is to help you make better choices, because better choices will lead to a better life, will lead to more happiness, purpose, fulfillment in your life. And that's the purpose of what I do, trying to give you resources via audio and video and books that I write and assemblies that I give and meet and greets that I do, to give you tools necessary to make better choices, to have a better life. Like I had already said before, the word consequence is just kind of a bigger, fancy word for result. And if you can connect that, right? And I'm going to segue that in or lead that into the last point that I want to make here. If you think of a consequence as a result, and you can kind of put this mathematical equation, every choice has a result. Every choice has a result. And if you think big picture, all of your choices, right? Whether if you're in middle school or you're in high school, your brain is operating at that point in your life. Probably very few of you are considering when you're 42, like me. You're in the here, now. Your friends are vaping. Your friends are experimenting with drugs and alcohol. Your friends are picking on other people. Your friends are getting picked on. You're succeeding in athletics. You're falling short in athletics. You're dealing with all of these emotions of middle and high school. And I get that. And I understand that that's where you're at in your life. But I want you to understand that every single day you're presented with a myriad or a bunch of choices. All of those choices have consequences. All of those choices, from deciding what socks you're going to put on in the morning, to what you're going to eat for lunch, to what you're going to do after school, to if you're going to study for a test, to if you're going to lie, cheat, and steal, if you're going to text when you're driving, all of these choices, the big ones, the little ones, whether you're having Cheerios or Fruity Pebbles, all of those choices have consequences, and all of those choices and consequences add up to your life. At 42 years old, when I look outward at my peers, my family, my friends, my life, I realize that, hey, all of our choices, all of our lives are the result of the choices that we make. And the little choice that you're making today, the little choice you're making today will compound or grow and grow and grow and grow. And then eventually you'll be 42 years old and you'll look at yourself in the mirror and you'll be able to look back at all the choices you've made and you'll realize, hey, my choices had consequences, some positive, some negative, and they've all added up to my life. And we only have one life. And that's why I value and appreciate this lesson, that of choices and consequences, as much as any lesson that I teach. And I also pointed this out to the students, and I'm going to point this out to you as well. There's no guarantees in life. And you may have heard that. You'll definitely hear that in the future, but there's no guarantee. So I'm presenting this lesson to you with the idea that, hey, by making positive choices, the odds of positive consequences or positive results are better, but there's no guarantee. If you make the positive, good choice of studying for a test, there's no guarantee that you're going to get an A on the test. If you make the positive choice to exercise and eat properly and get plenty of sleep, if you make those choices, it is possible that one day you could be diagnosed with cancer. There are no guarantees in life. I have a brother who lived life as well, as positive as possible, who was diagnosed with brain cancer. So you can do the right thing and still have a negative outcome or a negative consequence. So you might say, well, then why do it? Why put in the work? Why study? Why eat well? I do it because I understand that I have one life, and I understand that I have one opportunity for happiness and health and peace and fulfillment and to make a positive impact on others. I have one opportunity to do that. And by making positive choices, I increase the chances of a positive consequence or a positive outcome. So there's no guarantee. There's no guarantee of anything. But by doing the right thing, doing the best thing, doing the most positive thing, making that most positive choice, you're increasing your chances of success, peace, happiness, the good things in life. But there is the reality that you could do all the right things, make all the best possible choices, and have a negative outcome. I just want to put that out there because I want you to understand the reality of this, and that there's no guarantee that positive choice equals positive consequence, but it definitely increases your chances of a positive consequence. And I want to end this by saying that, these lessons came from a kid's picture book. And I presented this lesson in this book to kindergarten through fifth graders yesterday. And now I'm presenting it to middle and high schoolers today. But I could just as easily present it to myself looking in the mirror and my peers and people who are both older and younger than me as well. The idea of having choices in life and those choices having consequences and all of that adding up to your life, to your reality, is the same for young kids. It's the same for you, same for me, and people older than me. So I hope this episode helps you to make the best possible choice so that you can have the best possible consequence or best possible result of those choices. And I hope they add up to a happy, peaceful, fulfilling life for you. So thank you all for tuning in. I'm your host, Charlie the Spaniard Brenneman, former Spanish teacher and UFC fighter. This is Spaniard School of Student Podcast. I put out a new episode every Tuesday at 4 p.m. You can watch on youtube.com/Charlie Spaniard. You can listen to the Spaniard School podcast, which is on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, whatever podcast you use. Type it in, subscribe. If you haven't yet left a review, please consider doing so. I have, not right in front of me, but in the show notes down below, you'll see a link to my newest, most recent #1 best-selling book, Go Figure. We have plenty more to come out in that series. I'm also adapting my autobiography, Driven, to a young reader edition, so that'll be coming out soon. CharlieSpaniard.com is my website to inquire for speaking assemblies or different meet and greets or author visits. CharlieSpaniard.com, click on speaking, fill out the form. I'll get back to you. And in the meantime, thanks for tuning in. See you, folks.